All right, where's your boy Drew? He's not here either. Wandering the earth. Okay. All right, so let's do this. Okay, so today we are starting Ireland. We're going to start Ireland. Let me find where I have Ireland. Okay. Sorry, my computer's taking a moment. And then Raul, we'll just have you stay on after class and we'll just do your thing.
Right. So Mr. Olson wanted to talk with me about some manage back stuff between 225 and 250.
Okay. Well, let's just do your thing. Let's just do your thing real quick and then have you go do that. That's fine.
Okay.
That's fine. All right, guys. All right, gentlemen. So Ireland. First things first, in your notes, let's draw in Ireland real quick. So you're going to draw in Ireland. This is what it looks like. Okay. These four divisions are the like ancient counties of Ireland. Okay. And the Irish still use them as like regular terms. Okay. So when we read articles and things, Ireland still uses these terms all the time. Okay. So you need these four. So the purple, this green, this bluish, and this red. Okay. The top one here is called Ulster. ULSTR, Ulster. Okay, this one is called Leinster. LEINSTER, Leinster. The bottom one is called Munster, like the cheese, Munster. MUNSTER. Okay, and then this one over here is called Connacht. Connacht. All right, so those are the four regions, and the Irish will use those four regions the same way Americans would say something like the South or the North or, you know, the West, right? So it's, you definitely need to know these regions. You definitely need to know them. Today, all of these little divisions are the different counties, right? We don't need those. Those are not as important, right? But Irish people will definitely refer to like Ulster or Munster or Leinster, okay? The cities that you need, the first most important city is Dublin. Dublin, which is right here in Leinster. You need the city of Dublin, DUBLIN, Dublin. Okay. The next city that you need is right here, Belfast. BELFAST, Belfast. Okay. Above Belfast, up here, you need Derry, which is right here. Derry. Derry is in DERRY, Derry. All right. Over here, you need Galway. GALWAY, Galway. And then down here, you need Cork. Cork, like you put a cork in a wine bottle. All right. These other cities, you can put them here if they make you feel better, but we don't really need them as much. Okay. All right. So the next division that we need to get clear here, okay, is that this section is called Northern Ireland. It is not part of Ireland. Okay. It is part of Ulster here. It's like this section right here of Ulster. All right. It's called Northern Ireland. Northern Ireland is part of the UK. It's one of the countries of the UK. All right, so there's some things that are a little bit confusing. Okay, this country down here, the lower half of Ireland, this is what we call the Republic of Ireland. Okay, most Americans, when they say Ireland, this is what they mean, is the Republic of Ireland. Okay, this is where it's a little bit confusing. The name of the island itself is Ireland. Oops. The entire island is called Ireland. The entire island is Ireland. Okay. When Irish people say Ireland, they usually are talking about the island. Okay. So when Europeans use the word Ireland, they're usually talking about the island itself, the entire island. And this matters for Irish identity. Okay. Because an Irish person is Irish, but not Irish. Does that make sense? Right? Where a Northern Ireland person is Irish, but not Irish. They're Irish on the island, but not Irish on the Republic. But in order to make it really, really super clear for everybody, they just use the same word for everything. So context will tell you what they're talking about. Okay? Are you guys with me on that? Give me a thumbs up if you're ready to move. You guys, you understand everything? Okay. All right, so let's go back and let's start our Irish history. All right. The Irish history that we care about is going to start in 1601. It takes about 90 years, but England takes over Ireland during the 17th century. They take over Ireland during the 17th century, and Ireland has the distinction of being the first colony, England's first colony. Oh, whoops. Ireland is England's first colony. Okay. So during this time period, we don't usually go this far back in time, but as England takes over Ireland, England institutes something called the Protestant ascendancy. This is the Irish word for the British rule at the time. It's kind of like how, why is this thing not working? What's wrong with this thing? Come on, dummy. Okay. The Protestant ascendancy is the Irish word for the British rule. It's kind of like how the Indians used to call it the British Raj, right? Same kind of a deal. Now, the main conflict in Ireland is going to be a conflict between Catholics and Protestants. Okay, Catholics and Protestants. The British are Anglican. Anglican, Anglican. Anglican means Church of England. Okay, Church of England and Anglican are the same thing. Anglican is just the adjective for Church of England. So England is Church of England, right? They are Protestant, and the Catholics, the Irish are Catholics. At this point in time, the Irish have been Catholics for like 500 years, 500 or 600 years. They've been Catholic for a long time, and that the British have become Protestant. Well, in England at this time period, Catholicism is illegal. You cannot be Catholic in England, and they're actually during the English Civil War, they're actually going to murder like hundreds of thousands of Catholics in an attempt to try to exterminate the Catholics. So the British are treating the Irish very, very badly because of this religious difference. Now, since I don't think any of you guys are Christians, I don't think so anyway, right? None of you guys are Christians, so you guys maybe don't know the difference between Catholic and Protestant, perhaps, right? We don't need to get into a lot of the theological differences between the two. The biggest difference that you need is that Catholics have a leader called a pope. Catholics have a leader called the pope, and that pope gives them direction and directive, right? Protestants don't have a leader. They have like leaders of different churches, of like smaller church levels. Okay, Catholics believe that their leadership, that their pope is ordained by God, and Protestants do not believe that. Protestants believe that their leaders are just praying to God. Okay, we don't need to get into a lot of details about all of that, but what we need to know here is that the Irish are Catholic, the British are Protestant, and that the British have made Catholicism illegal. Okay, the British also institute something that is really, really unpopular, and it's the tithe. So Christians believe in something called a tithe. A tithe is traditionally 10% of your income that you pay to the church. That tithe is used to build churches and to expand the power of the church and stuff. In this case, the British make it a law where the tithe is basically a tax, that the Irish people have to pay tithing to pay for the Church of England. Now, this is really, really unpopular. This is something that the Irish people are going to talk about for hundreds of years, right? That they are really, really pissed off, that the English are making them pay for another church, right? This is actually going to lead us into something called the Wolftown Rebellion. I would make this our next letter. So the Wolftown Rebellion of 1798 is a rebellion that's inspired by the US, the American Revolution. Okay, USA breaks away from England in 1776. Well, I mean, we declare independence in 1776. It takes us a few years to figure it out, but 1776, the US breaks away, and when the US breaks away, it causes shocks through the British, through the English system, right? And those shocks through the system are going to have a lot of change and a lot of influence. Okay, one of those changes is that the Irish look at it and they say, if the Americans could break away, then maybe we can too. And so that's where we're going to get this armed rebellion. Okay, Wolfe Tone is the name of the man leading the rebellion. Wolfe is his first name, Tone is his last name. Okay, I'm sure he was super, super thrilled with his parents when they gave him that name. Okay, so one of the big changes is that the Irish look at it that they could rebel to. Okay, the other big change is that England is going to go through this like transformation where England is going to look at this and they're going to ask themselves, what went wrong? Why did we lose America? Right? Because America, we were making money off of it. It was pretty sweet, right? And then a bunch of like crazy dudes got upset about tea for some reason and stamps, and they just like really grossly overreacted. And now they're another country, right? That's the English perspective on everything, right? Is that the English are like, I don't know what the heck is, I don't know what the heck's wrong with America, why they're so upset about stamps and tea, right? And Americans just yell freedom and blow a bunch of stuff up. So the British now are going to enact the birth of their empire, and their empire is going to be kind of led by two big things that we've seen already. Okay, first, divide and conquer. This is going to be the birth of the British policy of divide and conquer, and also incrementalism. And we've seen that a lot, right? Like with India, especially with India, but to a lesser degree with South Africa, that when India wanted something, England would take whatever India wanted and give them just a little bit more and a little bit more and a little bit more and a little bit more, by constantly giving the Indians or the South Africans a little bit more, a little bit more, a little bit more. The British were able to stretch it out, right? Where India is demanding independence, and that independence takes 50 years, right? In the case of South Africa, it took like 30 years, right? That England's able to kind of drag this out. These two policies, England is going to start using in Ireland, and Ireland is kind of the test case for England. And they're going to test this out while England is trying to learn how to be an empire. They're looking around at the world and they're thinking that they can probably take it over, like the whole thing, And so they're going to give it a real, fighting chance over the 1800s. And they're going to take over most of Africa and India and a bunch of other stuff, right? Well, Ireland is where they're constantly testing these things out. The first big test is, first of all, the British shut down the Wolf Tone Rebellion, but the result is the Act of Union. In 1800, the British get the Irish to sign something called the Act of Union. The Act of Union creates the United Kingdom. Now, this is going to sound familiar to you, but in theory, the Act of Union is equality between England and Ireland, right? In theory, the Irish are going to be able to participate in the parliament, they're going to have a vote, they're going to have a say over policies and things, right? In theory, that's what's going to happen. In practice, I think we all know what's going to happen here, right? Is there any chance at all that Ireland is actually going to be equal? No, not a chance. Now, this is where we're going to introduce our first big Irish leader, Daniel O'Connell. Here he is. Here he is leading a group. Now, Daniel O'Connell, sorry, I had a piece of candy in my mouth. All right, so Daniel O'Connell is going to be our first big leader, and he's going to hold these monster meetings. Which should look familiar to you if you know your AP US history, because these should be very, very similar to the Second Great Awakening in the US, where they would hold these big giant meetings in like upper state New York and stuff in the burned over district. So Daniel O'Connell is leading these big old giant monster meetings. He is famous for a couple of things. First off, he's a great public speaker. He's really charismatic. He's a charismatic leader, right? And he's also going to be arguing in favor of Catholic rights. In England, it was illegal to be Catholic still. And so what they're finding is that the Irish are treated very, very badly because they're Catholics. Daniel O'Connell forms something called the Catholic Association in 1823. And the Catholic Association is basically arguing for Catholic rights, essentially. Now he's funding this with something called the Catholic rent. The Catholic rent is basically where Catholics are going to pay 1 penny every Sunday, and then that 1 penny gets put together to pay for the political lobbying. Okay. He's going to be opposed by something called the Orange Order. Now, this is the point where I'm going to introduce you to the main difference: Protestants and Catholics. Okay. Catholics are always going to be in green, and Protestants are always going to be in orange. Okay. That the Protestant groups, organizations, oftentimes are called like the Orange League or the Orange Men or the Orange Order or the Orange whatever, right? Orange is their color, green is the color of Republic of Ireland, of Catholic Ireland, right? That's why the Irish flag is green, white, and orange. Orange for the Protestants, green for the Catholics, and then white for the peace between them, at least in theory, that's what it is, right? Or, you know, we're gonna get this opposition here. The Orange Order is based out of Belfast. It's based in the north. Northern Ireland has become very Protestant. Now, the entire island itself is somewhere around like 20% Protestant, 20, 25% Protestant, somewhere around there, right? But most of those Protestants are centered in the north. Sorry, I have announcements. All right. Are any of you guys juniors running for SBO office next year? If so, you need to go down to AT 200 right now. Yeah, bro, you gotta go. They're expecting you now. All right. So the Protestants are centered around Belfast. Now, Belfast and North Ireland is Protestant Ireland. This is the Protestant area. Now, the reason why this is the Protestant area is because it's the closest to England. It's very, very close to England. Okay, so they get ships back and forth from England. They get 4, 5, 6 ships a day coming back and forth from England. They have lots and lots of contact with England. They also have a lot of British people who come over with their money and buy property and land here, right? This is the same kind of idea as like rich New Yorkers who move to like Wyoming and buy a mansion, you know, because they have so much money in New York, right? They're like barely middle class in New York, but they're like the richest person in the town when they move to Wyoming. Same kind of a deal, right? The moderately wealthy British people are coming over to Ireland and being like the wealthiest people here. So North Ireland has a couple, this is where we're going to start seeing this difference. Okay, so first off, North Ireland is Protestant. Second off, North Ireland is also going to be the first part of Ireland, and for a while, the only part of Ireland with industry. It's the only place where the Industrial Revolution is happening, in Belfast in particular. So the first factories are being opened up in Belfast. As soon as you have factories, what do factories do to the population of a country? Right? The population urbanizes. The population moves from the countryside into the city because people got to work in the factory, right? So Belfast is the fastest growing area of Ireland because of urbanization. It's the only industrial area because of the British. It's the most Protestant. It's the most English speaking, and it's also going to be the most pro-England. This division between them is, a lot of times we say that this is just a religious difference, but I don't think it is just a religious difference, because Protestants live down here too, and they don't have any conflict. This is primarily, I think, primarily a money difference. That this is where the money is. This is where the wealthy people are. And as a matter of identity, right, the wealthy people are the Protestants, right? If we think of this in the term of like a caste system, this is the wealthy people attempting to create an upper caste of Protestants. See what's going on, right? Like if we know what we're looking for, we've seen this in America, we've seen this in South Africa, we've seen this in India, we're now starting to see this in Ireland as well, right? I think religion is part of the problem, is part of the issue, but it is not the entire issue. Cool? You guys good on this? All right. This tithe is going to lead us into something called the tithe war, and this will be the last thing we're going to do today. But the tithe war is, the tithe war from 1830 to 1836 is going to be a pretty good example of what this Irish rebellion is going to look like. Okay? Now, when we talked about the United States, we had Martin Luther King. Talked about South Africa, we had Nelson Mandela. Talked about India, and we had Gandhi, right? In all three of those examples, we saw political change being led by a pacifist, right? By a leader who was trying to avoid violence, who was trying to, cool everybody down, right? And who was trying to lead this. Ireland does not have a leader like that. Ireland does not have a Gandhi figure. Ireland does not have a Mandela figure, right? What Ireland does have is lots and lots of organizations, all of which go into violence. Ireland is going to default into violence much, much more than what we've seen before. Now, this Irish violence is going to be what we call asymmetrical warfare. Asymmetrical warfare. Previous classes may have maybe called it guerrilla fighting, like guerrilla warfare, right? You guys are you familiar with guerrilla warfare? Mike, are you familiar with guerrilla warfare?
The basic, isn't it using sort of unconventional means of warfare?
Yeah. Stuff like, blowing things up and bombing things and like assassinating people and stuff like that, right? Guerrilla warfare is guerrilla is what you're supposed to say, right? The Irish don't really call it that, but that's what they're doing is guerrilla warfare. So these warfare, the kind of official term for this is called asymmetrical warfare. So this is warfare that does not have like an army. There isn't an Irish army of like soldiers marching the streets in uniforms. That's not what we have. What we have is like, farmers who look like they're totally fine, and then the soldiers walk past them, and then the farmers like jump them in the middle of the night and burn their house down. Right? That's what we have is asymmetrical warfare. Like if you look at like how they count this war, right? The war is 242 homicides and robberies and burglaries and burnings and cattle maimings, right? Like that's what we're looking at, is that these wars are going to be like that. The Irish Revolution is all going to be that kind of stuff. It's all going to be this kind of asymmetrical fighting. Now, the Tithe War of the 1830s is the Irish basically refusing to pay tithes. They don't want to pay for tithes. They do not want to pay for the Anglican Church anymore. And it results in 1838 with the Commutation Act, where they do not have to pay their tithe anymore. This will eventually lead into 1869, the Irish Church Act. This is quite a ways down the line, but this is where the Anglican Church breaks off the Church of Ireland and then lets the Church of Ireland. But those are both coming. We have the potato famine in between here, so I don't want you to think that this is the only thing here. But we're dealing with the religion issue at this point. Okay, I'm going to leave that here. This is a good place to stop. I just posted the new discussion online. I just posted it today. So it's not going to be due this Sunday. It'll be due the following Sunday. And it's just a chapter out of your textbook. The chapter out of your textbook, just like we did with India and South Africa. Okay. I think this is a good place to stop. I'm going to give you a heads up though that the last day for any work at all is Monday the 15th. Okay. That includes if you need to like retake a test or a quiz, if you need to retake anything. It also includes for most of you your notes. I think Yash and Mike are the only two who've turned in their notes, I think. Oh no, Dhruv did too. Dhruv did it. Yeah. So Ilhan, Rahul, I don't think you guys have turned in your notes.
India Pakistan notes?
Yeah.
Remember I came in person to you?
Oh yeah.
And I gave you.
I'll double check and make sure I put the points on. But yeah. All right. So I guess I'm just talking to Ilhan then. Yeah. All right. So just make sure I get your notes. Make sure I get any assignments that are in there. Everything Ireland is going on fourth quarter. Okay. So I'm done with third quarter. I still need to grade your tests, obviously. So I'll grade those this weekend. I'll grade those this weekend and that'll be good. And that'll be good. I meant to grade them last weekend and then the weather got really good and I went out bike riding instead. So what are you going to do? What are you going to do? Sometimes you got to, enjoy the spring, right? So I'll grade them. I'll grade them soon. All right. Do you guys have any questions or problems? Okay. Reach out to Tiffany and see why she's missing class. Have her come to class.